Imagine if you could easily find solutions to make your region or city smarter, greener, better connected, more social, and closer to citizens. The Interreg Europe Policy Learning Platform can help you access knowledge about the latest policy trends, discover expert-validated good practices from all over Europe, find solutions in our peer review, get tailored support from our expert team. We can connect you with the right people and organizations. Together, we will find ways to solve your region's or city's challenges. Start your policy learning journey today.
Good afternoon and welcome to the second episode of the Interreg Europe webinar series on climate adaptation in deltas and coastal regions. Today we are focusing on wetland restoration. So my name is Astrid Severin and I'm a thematic expert for environment and resource efficiency at the Interreg Europe Policy Learning Platform. I would also like to welcome my colleagues Magda and Michaliková, which is also a thematic expert for environment and resource efficiency, and Lotte van Meel, our communication manager, which is working with us in the background. So as a start, let me share some housekeeping rules with you. As always, we are recording this webinar and the recordings will be later available online along with all the presentations. If you have missed our first episode on coastal restoration, you can find it online together with all the PowerPoints and some extra information. If you have any questions, and we hope you will have many questions, and we will have a good discussion today on wetland restoration, you can post them in the chat together with anything in terms of useful links and information that is coming from our colleagues as well. And finally, at the end, we will ask you for your feedback. There will be a little survey which will pop up after the end of the webinar. And there you can also suggest some topics on climate adaptation or nature restoration for the future, or you can request a matchmaking or a peer review with the Policy Learning Platform. So today we're talking about wetlands restoration, I would like to ask you to go to the next slide. Yeah, so wetlands, as you all know, are very rich ecosystems, and they're providing a lot of services to human well-being, including the storage of carbon or the regulation of water supply and quality. They mitigate the climate impact, and they participate also in the mitigation of natural disasters. However, since many years, wetlands are subject to continued degradation, to land drainage and conversion, so far so that the Joint Research Center has established that they're the poorest or the worst status of all ecosystems in Europe. So restoration measures are really desperately needed to improve the quality of our wetlands and the ecosystem services that they can deliver. Wetlands also provide an enormous economic value. The EU biodiversity strategy has been concluding that protecting coastal wetlands could save the insurance industry around 50 billion euros annually through the reduction of flood damage losses. So there should be a lot of interest also from this point of view on wetlands restoration. In Interreg Europe, there are already a lot of projects in the former programming period that have been working with nature restoration, with biodiversity, with water-linked natural heritage, and also with deltas and land-sea ecosystems. We will hear from them today. And also the new calls in this programming period have already been bringing about some new projects, which you will see on the next slides. So we hope that many more projects will come up in the future to deal with these important issues. So we are basing our webinar today on the experience that is coming out of the projects of Interact Europe. We have been working on coastal restoration. We were so happy to have representatives of the Ebro Delta, the Po Delta, and also Southern Ireland. And today we are counting on the contributions from Kempen Maasland, from Weser-Ems, and the Danube Delta. We have a really rich agenda. So after this little opening here, we will have a keynote presentation from Chris Baker from Wetlands International. He's going to speak to us about why wetlands matter. So hello, Chris. We're really happy to have you with us to set the scene of this webinar. And then we will go into some policy changes and good practices. So we will then hear from Katrien Schaerlaekens from the Regional Landscapes Kempen and Maasland about their work on restoring rivers and wetlands, in particular for flood prevention. So hello, Katrien, to you. We will then go to the neighboring environment in Germany and hear from Dr. Claus Hinz from Lower Saxony State Agency for Water Management, Coastal and Nature Conservation about their work in the Weser-Ems region. So hello to you as well. And then we are moving further south to the Danube Delta. Jenica Hanganu is with us, who is going to speak about their work on wetland restorations in that beautiful delta as well. And then we will finish off with some good discussions and wrap up on conclusions. Before I'm going to now ask our keynote speaker, Chris Baker, we have also prepared two little polls where we would like to ask you to let us know who we have in the audience. So Lotte has already launched it. So first of all, please tell us what type of organization you're representing. You may be from an EU institution or a local regional national authority, a private organization or consultancy, an NGO or fund, or maybe from academia. And maybe from a completely different type of organization. In any case, we would be happy if you could let us know also in the chat where you're coming from. Okay, so let's see who we have today. Oh, a lot of regional and local authorities, half of them. As expected, lots of NGOs and funds, also academia. So the subject is very interesting. So then let's ask our second question, which is looking into why you're here. What is your main interest? So are you, and you have multiple choice, so you can basically tick everything if you want. So you're interested in climate adaptation measures in deltas or coastal regions, particularly in wetland restoration, flood protection, or in biodiversity enhancement. So please let us know that as well. Thank you. All right. So all of these subjects are of interest, of course, particularly the wetland restoration and climate adaptation and biodiversity enhancement. So I could name them all. So thank you very much for participating in these polls. So we see there is interest in what we are going to talk about today. So without further ado, I would like to give the word now to Chris Baker. So Chris, please go ahead and let us know why wetlands matter.
Okay, I'll just get my thing sort of started. Thanks very much for the introduction, Astrid. I'm just going to get my slides up and then I can make a start. Okay, I should be visible to most of you by now. I'll just go into presentation mode. Does that look good?
Everything's set. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Isn't it wonderful when things work out? Now, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Chris Baker. I work for Wetlands International. Actually, I've worked for Wetlands International now for some 20 years. And just recently, I moved into the position of the director of our European operation based out of Brussels. Just by way of a brief intro, our European office is actually an association organization. We work with, at the moment, 12 members across the region and a much wider network of technical, academic, civil society and government partners across the whole region. So we're growing fast. We've been in existence about 10 years. Our main niche, if you like, is, as for many NGOs operating in the European region, is to try and connect policy development to actual practice and needs that are experienced on the ground, and complete the loop by feeding back and helping actors on the ground to understand, interpret, implement EU policy. In addition to that, we do an awful lot of trying to inspire and mobilize action on the ground through our members and partners to try and show some of the best practices and ways of working. So that's a little bit of a summary of us. It's a great pleasure, even a privilege, to be asked to speak to you all today. So thank you very much to Astrid and her team for asking us to be involved. Just to zoom out, I mean, you've touched on a lot of my first slides already, Astrid, so thanks. But just to reinforce it, of course, I think it's no surprise to people here that I would focus in on climate. Climate is a major challenge and a recognized challenge now. The facts are on the ground, so to say. You can see from the floods and the droughts that Europe's been experiencing in the last years that climate change is here and it's happening now. The floods in Germany, in southern Netherlands and Belgium a couple of years back, the droughts we've experienced in the Mediterranean. These are very real things that are going on, and it feels this year as though we're going to be confronted with some similar challenges through the summer. Now, this is not just a climate change problem, of course. This is also a consequence of, if you like, our business as usual, as part of our social economy, how we manage land, how we produce our food, how we manage water resources to support industry and society as a whole. And we've, if you like, created the basis for a perfect storm. And climate change is really coming in with climate extremes of too much or too little rainfall on top of that. And that's what's driving a lot of these floods and droughts where we see them. Water can't infiltrate into the ground under conditions of heavy rainfall. It runs off much faster and quicker than ever before. On the contrary, we're getting longer periods without rainfall, and the soil storage has been diminished due to business of land, as usual, land management approaches, and we experience drought more acutely and with greater longevity. Now, just an interesting fact, this has been researched in a global analysis recently. You may be aware of a team that looks into the so-called planetary boundaries. This has looked in the past at blue water, but they decided to look at green water last year. And they published an interesting report which just serves to underscore this. Our green water is a lower level, they estimate, than any time since the Holocene. And by green water, that's water in our soils, water in our land, under agricultural production, but also in ecosystems such as wetlands. Effectively, we're drying the planet out. And that's just the same story as is in Europe. This is a catastrophe that's playing out in terms of how it impacts wetlands as well, of course. They're very important ecosystems, wetlands, and with many climate relevant facts, as Astrid already highlighted, per unit area, they contain more carbon than any other ecosystem. I think in many cases, 10 times more than forest. They have the highest per unit area of species. Their biodiversity is extremely high. They're also probably, well, certainly the most important type of ecosystem in terms of how you regulate water resources. They store and release water and try and help build our resilience that way. So therefore, if you like, this perfect storm of climate is also a water biodiversity and therefore a wetland crisis. And that's helped driving the figures that are on this slide and which Astrid highlighted. But of course, and you would expect me to say it, and it's true, wetlands are also part of the solution. If we can find ways to bring back wetlands, then by returning these ecosystem services that Astrid highlighted, the carbon storage, the ability to detain and retain water, improving our biodiversity, we have a wide range of benefits that can be brought back in. And when you're looking at a climate-affected future, this resilience, if you like, is what we really need as part of the package of measures to try and help make life more livable, as well as to try and reduce the speed and impact of climate change itself. Now, this isn't, if you like, how we've looked at wetlands in the past, which has largely been more piecemeal, small-scale habitat restoration. This is really looking at wetlands as systems, as parts of landscapes, and building back large-scale nature-based solutions to do that. And what I'm really excited to see by the presentations after this, that the cases really talk in terms of that. When you have healthy wetlands, you have improved water cycles, you have improved soil health, you have enhanced biodiversity, and you have the capacity to help protect against natural disasters which we're experiencing. It's not the whole solution, but it's certainly an important part of it. And it certainly should be a greater part of our dialogue, which still tends towards traditional hard engineering solutions such as dikes, dams, etc., as a response to climate change. Honestly speaking, if we continue in that direction, we're just digging the hole deeper. The EU recognises this. I mean, there's a raft of EU policy which drives this type of thinking, both historically, if you like, going back to the Habitats Directive and the Birds Directive, which were more biodiversity focused, the Water Framework and Floods Directive, which the implications of their good implementation are also very positive for wetlands as part of systems and at landscape scale, although obviously a more tricky directive to implement. But of course, and most excitingly for us, the Green Deal and the raft of legislation coming through that offers real promise, if the Parliament signs off on it, to really bring back wetlands at a really significant scale. And I'm talking in particular about the nature restoration law, which no doubt some of you are familiar with, and observing the rather bumpy road it's experiencing along the way at the moment. Yeah, so when you look at these this raft of legislation, you really see a picture which shows you can really drive change on the ground at landscape scale: water, soil, forests, agriculture, all together. If we can get these things in concert implemented on the ground, we can have the sorts of impacts that we know nature-based solutions, wetland solutions, can really have. Just briefly, keep my eye on the time, I want to zoom in on a couple of particular wetland types that we are focusing on a lot in Wetlands International Europe. Peatlands are perhaps one of the most relevant wetland ecosystem types in this respect. They are unique in the volume of carbon that they store, unique in the way they sit typically at the head of our rivers, withholding water and releasing it throughout the year, so serving as a natural flood mitigator and a natural support to water base flow to avoid drought. And they are frequently totally unique in the assemblages and the species which they support when they're in good condition. But unfortunately, that's not the case. We have lost an awful lot of our wetlands, or degraded them, as you can see from the slide, up to 50% already degraded. And an estimate recently put the contribution of degraded peatlands to the EU's overall agricultural CO2 emissions at 25%. So there's a big win here if we can really get to grips with how we can maintain our peatlands. Now, this is a complex field that would probably merit a whole presentation all of its own. But simply put, there's different actions we see. We have a lot of peatlands that are degraded. They're under production, they're under forest, but they're drained. And by draining, you oxidize the carbon and it's released into the air. One thing is simply to bring water levels back up and to find different land uses there. If we re-wet drained peatland soils, there's an estimate we would capture an additional 104 million tons of carbon per year. It's a huge win. The implications, of course, for production of wood and for food production on those lands are part of what's underpinning some of the opposition to the nature restoration law. But there are alternatives. What we're talking about is not simply turning land back to nature or not. We're talking about changing the way we produce on land that's more sympathetic to peatlands. If you can come up with, for instance, cultivating reeds for insulation material or growing sphagnum moss for growing media in place of some of the other uses of peatlands, you can raise water levels and you can safeguard the carbon within them and still provide rural communities with productive use of land. And that's in addition to going to more traditional conservation of our existing more pristine peatlands, of which only 10% are currently protected across the region. The second main area I want to talk about is our rivers. You only have to look at this startling multicolor map on the right-hand side of the slide to see what the issues are in rivers. This is an assessment of barriers across European rivers of every sort, from a culvert to a ford to a major hydropower dam. Every dot represents a barrier. Now, when you think of a river as a longitudinal water system, really you can think of it as being a box of sushi. It's been cut into little pieces. The connectivity of the water, the flows from upstream to downstream, are constantly interrupted. That has serious implications for the biodiversity, the migration of species of fish. But it's not just that, it's laterally as well. Our rivers are also disconnected from their floodplains. The state of floodplain health in the EU is that you have 70 to 90% of these are degraded. It's a huge challenge. What we want to promote is that really we start to focus on how we can improve the connectivity in reaches and, where possible, even entire rivers. That means looking at the barriers which are obsolete. Many of them have been there for more than 100 years and perform little or no practical purpose anymore. Take those out. And we're working with a series of partners and as part of a dam removal initiative in the region to try and promote that. Lateral connectivity is more complex in some ways. It extends into how you manage agricultural land for drainage and so forth. But there's good indicators within the climate action strategy within the EU. Terminology such as landscape scale sponges try to bring back landscape scale floodplain areas which retain water, block drainage, turn it over to new use. And in terms of prioritizing these sorts of actions, we want to prioritize it where we have key areas for important biodiversity, such as migratory fish. So we have a swimways approach we want to promote. This is all very
three minutes, yes, please.
I'm nearly there. Really, actually, this is my last slide. So what we're asking is really a move from piecemeal, habitat-driven landscape restoration to something which has meaning and impact at landscape scale for people and for biodiversity as a way to build resilience back into society against the effects of climate change. This is very tough, but actually, when you look at what's happening in Europe, I think there are more cases and more evidence than most anywhere else in the world. The trick is how we can learn from these and we can enable, create enabling environments for actors across Europe to try and bring these approaches forward. Wetlands International has that as a core of their strategic intent. We want to promote landscape scale change, and we work with actors such as the Landscape Finance Lab, Common Land, WWF, in trying to develop common frameworks, language which speaks to not just, if you like, traditional conservationists, people concerned with ecosystem restoration, but also communicates to the outside world, to investors, to governments, to private sector actors. This is an example of the framework which was recently endorsed as part of the UN Decade on Restoration. It's called the Four Returns Framework, and it seems to lay out a series of principles and steps that you should undertake at a very simplistic level of how to mobilize landscape scale restoration. I won't go through it in detail. Key aspects are, don't expect to get it done in a couple of years. It's more than a project cycle. You're talking about 5, 10, 15, 20 even years to really get impact on the ground. Work with local communities, private sector, as well as government. This is a collective endeavor. If you want people to work with you and be with you for the journey, you need to talk to them from the outset and make them part of the solutions that you develop together. Work with your private sector, show them the added value. I was really excited to see, Astrid, your slide where you highlighted the potential benefits from restoration, what it can bring. We need to bring these arguments further forward and dialogue with private sector actors, make them part of the action. So I hope that is a sort of a quick snapshot of the issue, if that helps us along our way with the webinar. And I've had a sneak preview of some of the presentations that are coming out. I know that you're going to have some really good detail and insights into how you can really take these sorts of thoughts and approaches forward on the ground. So thanks very much for the chance to speak.
Thank you very much for this insightful introduction, Chris. That is very, very helpful to set our scene here. Yeah, it has been showing again with some specific figures at in what state wetlands are. Actually, it's quite shocking to hear that that 70 to 90% are degraded. That is, yeah, I cannot say it differently. Is a shocking figure. I wasn't aware of that. When starting to look into wetlands, I thought it was more or less the same for the different ecosystems. And yet it is so important with regard to climate change, with regard, for example, also to the extreme weather events that you have been pointing out in terms of droughts and floods and so on. So my question would be, is like, if as you finished with that and I started with it, if the insurance industry can save so much money by being better prepared for these floods, for example, why is the connection not being made? What do you think? What is the main barrier to bringing more money into wetland restoration? Because there seems to be not enough funding available also.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think by and large, much of the insurance industry is aware of parts of it. I mean, they have good maps of flooding. They know where places flood. I think it's a broader societal question. The EU invests quite within the capacity it has quite heavily, I think, through programs such as Interreg, Horizon 2020 projects in terms of bringing knowledge together and supporting particular initiatives. But when you look at what that means against what needs to happen, it will never be enough. It's not realistic to expect it. So you have to then look at bringing these different actors in, such as the insurance sector, private sector, as well as government, to try and get the resources together. Our experience around the world is you have to localize it in the end. You have to start working with partnerships with people on the ground, develop a common understanding of what the issues are that they are collectively facing, understanding individual interests within that collective vision, and then work together and start to tackle the problems. It's not something that's overcome with one single investment. We've worked in Asia, for instance, on coastal defense in this way, and we've found not just the engineering consultancies, but local businesses start to understand the risks that are posed by it, and they start to invest in line with a common vision. So a lot of our position is you need to start this way, get a local problem and bring in local actors to see it, and then you start to get interest in investment.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think there is a lot of controversy also on the ground already. So bringing people together and starting, well, not only to communicate, as we would say, but also in some kind of crisis management. I think there has to start a local communication on these issues. We have a question also from the chat asking you, if you were a regional government and you could enact regional legislation and program regional funding, what would you do to achieve impact in climate adaptation through action on wetlands by 2030? Yeah, you must have the one-off solution.
Yeah, that's a very tough question. I think you need to invest in understanding the nature of the risks within your region in relation to biodiversity, water security, and climate. There's a lot of knowledge and information out there, so it's not you have to go out and do research necessarily. And at the same time, you need to invest in enabling these sorts of innovative partnerships to come together. You need to create an enabling environment where private sector, civil society, communities can talk, understand based upon this knowledge the challenge you face, and then try to align your investment to enable the right scale of investments to come forward. And that's not expecting the regional government to do it, but you need to stimulate your investors, insurance companies, private sector actors to follow along with that planning. That would be my suggestion. I don't think it's realistic to expect government to be able to solve all with its money, but it has a key role to convene and enable dialogue to take it in that direction.
Thank you. I think this is very important what you're saying, this enabling environment and also this addressing the issues, making aware of the risks and showing also some solutions and get the local actors together to act together on these risks locally. This is an important point that you're making. So thank you very much, Chris, for your introduction and for answering these first questions. Before giving the word to our experts, we have two more little polls just to see a little bit what you're doing in terms of wetlands.
Astrid, it seems you have muted yourself.
Yeah, I'm sorry for this. So just to see if in your region you're losing wetlands to other land use. So yes, no, or I don't know. I'm sure you have already started voting while I was muted. Okay. Yes, you're losing 72%, a lot, and no, only 10%. Thank you very much. And then let's see if there is any approach there on restoration measures for wetlands. Also in your regions, are they implemented? Yes, no, or you don't know? Thank you. So there is a huge problem you're losing, but there is also restoration measures implemented at big scale. So that is very good to see. Well, thank you very much for participating in that. We are now going to hear 3 examples from regions which are also working on wetland restoration measures and floodplains. We are really happy to have here with us Katrien from the Regional Landscapes Kempen and Maasland. So Katrien, we're looking forward to your presentation on restoring rivers and wetlands for flood prevention in the border region, Belgium and the Netherlands. So Katrien, the word is yours.
Yes, thank you, Astrid. I'm going to share my presentation. Can you see it?
Now it's fine. Yes.
Okay. So thank you for inviting me. My name is Katrien Schaerlaekens, and in fact, I work for the river park Meuse Valley and the Meuse Valley on the border between the Flemish part of Belgium and the Netherlands. The occasion, I guess, why you asked us to do a talk was our Interreg project Wildlife Economy. In fact, my colleague Erwin has all the credits for that. It's not the aim today. The focus today is on water system, but very briefly, we did an Interreg project as well in the valley of the Meuse. You can see it here in green. And in Kempenbroek, which are very close to each other, but have different water functions. They're both cross-border with the Netherlands. You can see here at the outskirts of Belgium. Here's Maastricht, here's Brussels, here's Rotterdam. In fact, the Meuse Valley, the Meuse is a large river, so the water system is transport water and also making lots of space for water. But Kempenbroek, maybe for another learning platform, is all about wetland swamps and wetlands to hold water. So, and we both also have secondary goals such as recreation and tourism. That's why we did wildlife economy. But today, let's focus on the water. But I should warn you, our NGO, it's called Regional Landschap Kempen and Maasland. We have multi-perspective. We have a landscape focus. Water is extremely important, but the people and the local appraisal and recreation is always also there. And it's how you combine it to make the landscape more resilient. Of course, that's what we work on together with a lot of partners from Belgium and so something more about this part, if you take this long valley in your head, you can see it again on the Meuse Basin map. I'm talking about this stretch of river. It's about 40-50 kilometers long. It's the border between both countries, but it's in fact part of a super large system, the Meuse system, which is about 1,000 kilometers long and has a small but strange basin form. It's a rain river, so every drop of rain, and it can rain heavily for days in the Ardennes. We saw that only 2 years ago. It's a rain river, so every drop of rain has to pass the rest of the Meuse, of course, so we are all connected. It's one Meuse family. But this traject I will talk about today is very special because it has always been very dynamic, super dynamic, with very curvy part of the river. And upstream, a large industrialization took place already in the 19th century. You have large cities such as Liège or Maastricht or Namur, really on the banks of the river. So all this rain that falls needs to get out of these cities as quick as possible. And because of industrialization, this very curvy piece I work for was very difficult for shipments the ships were too large, the river was too wild. So in 19th century already, from these large cities upstream, canals were made. And this is why this stretch is the only stretch without shipment. And this is a big opportunity to do wetland river restoration, to create more space for the river. There are no dams or weirs in this stretch. So in the 19th and at the end of the 20th century, when big floodings appeared, this region clicked together several dynamics. Flood protection, of course, because these floodings were really, really big disasters. People didn't want to have this again. A lot of local awareness. You had nature development plans already before these floodings, especially from the Netherlands, where river restoration and nature restoration really were back on the table after all the events of the 20th century and the deep diving of the biodiversity and the dirt in the river. But in this stretch, you also had very active gravel mining. In the 20th century, they just earned lots of money by extracting gravel everywhere in the river, next to the river. Lots of lakes are still showing the results. And then when everything clicked together, laws changed, so the policy changed, and as well in the Netherlands as in Belgium, and gravel mining was no longer possible. They put an end to it, except if it was used as a lever or a mean to create flood risk protection and nature. So in the law, it changed that gravel extraction only was possible still if afterwards, after the gravel extraction, it would become nature. So this was a huge, huge change in the law that made a new way of working together possible. And then very early, in the beginning of the plans, also recreation and to allow people to enjoy this restoration landscape and hiking and biking was in the plans from the beginning, and I will come to that. Here you can see the stretch I was talking about, and you can see the whole green color is where the river can come when it rains a lot upstream. It's mostly nature. It's also agriculture. The winter bed of the river. And you can see all those lakes. It's all former gravel pits that has been given back to nature and is also put in the water system. So all those lakes can fill up when rain is coming. And to give you an example, the river park between the canals and the highways is like 13,000 hectares. And when you have a high water situation, 1/3 of it becomes the Meuse. And if there's no rain or it's a normal situation, you only see this blue line, which is the Meuse. You can see also the canals I spoke about. Here are some key figures. It's one river, of course, no weirs. It's only part without weirs and without dots on the map Chris showed. It's densely populated. It has always been a rich valley, so lots of small villages. Maastricht is, of course, bigger. Different nature areas. It's a highway for birds. I will not talk too much about it. And you can also see that people hike and bike there very much. This is also something I wanted to show because landscape scale is important, system scale is important, and this river park, this part of the Meuse is also needs to get connected even better to the other large landscapes in like Eifel, Hoge Vene, Haute-Fagne in French, the Hoge Kempen, the Mainweg. So it's like, part of a necklace, if you know what I mean. And here you can see a picture of how it looks in real life. You can see the gravel. Here you can see an old bank, like a 20th century bank, and on the other part, a large restoration took place. And after the gravel mining leaves the area, they leave it, they conclude with nature organizations how it should be formed. And then afterwards, nature takes over and nothing is planted there. Every seed comes from the river, comes from the grazers or the other animals spreading the seeds. So you get this mosaic landscape, in fact, by doing process nature. Do as less as possible. So we do a monitoring of the ecological effects of the river restoration. We do it every 10 years with all the partners involved. The last one was 2 years ago, and in the presentation, the link is there to the English report on the last monitoring. And you can see here some keys to ecological success, but also later in the presentation, some challenges, because we are not there yet. It's very challenging.
Katrien, you have 2 minutes left.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, I will not go into detail then. Some are very logical, very important. The first one is to give the river, use the natural behavior of the river to create as much dynamic and ecological success as possible. Connectivity is logic. Yeah, landscape should be able to shift. Grazers are used, grazers that stay in the area, and scale is of course also very logic. You have to upscale as much as you can and give it some time. Some challenges then, we see that erosion and bank retreat, it's normal behavior for a free-flowing river, but people tend to focus on safety and engineering, especially in the low countries. It's engineering land, so the Meuse is fixed, and it's very difficult to get these new principles into the heads of the partners, some partners involved. The river also needs sediment, but what is then? You have we need also this gravel industry to help us restore the river. Gravel is taken out, so this is also a challenge. You have to restore the natural flow regime, but you have a lot of industry using Meuse water, and you have to work on drought as well. But you see that all policy, all money as well is on flood risk. But drought is really a big challenge as well. Please visit the link to see the full report, some images, and this is on below. You see what a flood, a high water situation looks like. But above you see drought. And to give you one last number, above you see about 10 cubic meters per second going through this Meuse system, and below you see not a double, not triple, but 300 times more the amount of water. So this is 10, this is 3,270. So it gives an idea of the stretch on which the landscape is in.
Please conclude, yes?
Yes, this is my last slide, because and a very important one, because I think, and this is why the river park is there, that people are really central to restoration success. If you want to restore wetlands, you need not only the people to do it, but you need the inhabitants to carry your message. We engage local communities and stakeholders. We also invest together with the Flemish government in particular in the rest of the landscape, the cultural heritage. And we did a survey, and we see that our efforts are being rewarded, because the people that live there, they had a dirty river in the 90s. They have a whole new a whole new phase now in their environment, and the river is back in the hearts of the people. Of course, there's also an economic spin-off, but this will be for another time. I want to thank you.
Thank you very much. That is also an important figure that you can see here in terms of return that you're having. So bravo for this presentation. sharing with us the gist of many years of river restoration, and also presenting us what Chris called like a large system, like a super large system, a landscape that you're restoring. So this is very interesting, of course, and you see it's back in the heart of the people. If I saw it as quickly as you have like 1 million bikers, 300,000 hikers. So this is really something people are using again. It's in the heart and minds of people. And of course, you're doing a lot on protecting the area as well, and the cities which are in there. So thank you very much for this interesting presentation. So please don't hesitate to give us some questions as well in the chat. In the meantime, I would like to give the word to Chris. So Chris, what did you take from this presentation?
Exactly as you said, Astrid, it's a really fantastic example of a large-scale, long-term investment to try and bring back some of the health of the river system. So I thought it was fantastic. I'm always really interested, how did you get started? And your own organization, Katrien, was that part of the secret of success, an NGO that can convene people around this stretch of the river? How do you mobilize this at the start?
Well, the river park was made in 2007 by our NGO, but together with local communities and the provinces, because that early it was already clear that the potential of the large river restoration for people, for recreational businesses would be big. And I think the work of the river restoration itself is been done by the government, the Flemish and the Dutch government. I think the border was also a lever. If one does one thing, the other one has to follow. This was like a strength of the region and not a handicap. Borders can be real lever to a situation. So they did the restoration, but I guess what our NGO does is translate this and communicate this and make it close, not only literally, but also psychologically, like it's for us to use, it's for the benefit of all, which is of course the philosophy about behind all the parks worldwide. So you have to make a connection between what the engineers are doing on the river, which is great, but the results and the chances for people to also be part of that, and not something that is just happening with not enough knowledge. So I think knowledge on what is happening and why it is needed is crucial. And we all have lots of knowledge, and universities even more, but you should get the knowledge into these little villages as well.
We're helping also with the translation of this, like the academic knowledge. How can this be made accessible to people that are not academics, and that they can understand what's going on? But I think maybe, Chris, you had another question.
Yeah, just because I mean, often we see it in our work as well. Some of the hardest people to get on board are the landowners, the farmers who originally, you're asking them to change what they're doing, and sometimes that has a implied impact on them. What were your tips and tricks?
What of course was very specific in the Meuse Valley is this gravel extraction, and they had to stop in the old law. They got a new chance on participating in the restoration project, and of course these gravel extractors, they bought land which was too close to the river and was never there before the 1950s. Farmers in older days knew exactly where to farm and where not, so they bought recent patches, and they made a good price. It's industry, it's a big business. So they made a good price for these farmers that had land too close to the river. They made irrigation systems so that farmers farther from the same farmers but further from the river had bigger crops because of the water of all those lakes you saw on the map. So yeah, the gravel extraction or the cooperation with industry to give good prices to people and to give other means on other places, this was really important. Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's shaping win-wins really, where the
Yes.
farmers they get a different type of benefit to what they were getting
Yes.
before.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have had a similar question from Victoria, who's asking how did the project get the landowners' acceptance on the banks of the rivers, as they must have lost and land to the floodplains. But I think we have already touched upon it. You have just explained it, and maybe at the end when we have our conclusions, because this question with the landowners is a very important one, we can come back to all of you to see a little bit how this can be addressed. So with this, would be a big pleasure to go to the neighboring country. Thank you very much, Katrien. So we go now to Germany, another neighbor, and we're asking Dr. Claus Hinz to speak to us about the wasteland restoration in the Weser-Ems region. So we have a very nice example here from Koldemünche. Please go ahead.
Thanks a lot. So I'm working for the Land Agency for Safe Dikes, Clean Water and Maintaining Biodiversity in Germany in Lower Saxony, and my main project is building the tidal polder Koldemünche, where we try to restore tidal wetlands and tidal creek and so on. And this whole thing is part of the Master Plan Ems 2050. And the tidal area of the Ems today has several issues. There's a severe slit problem. If you look to it, it's called fluid mud. It's quite a problem to manage. It's very sediment loaded water that's something in between mud and fluid. You can see it in the lower left. And even in the upper columns of the water in the River Ems, there's still many sediments, and you can see it in the lower right. And thus we have a low water quality, and the whole area is canalized. It was deepened and straightened. Thus we have a large tidal range with a pronounced flood current that adds to the slit problem and enhances it very much in the summer times. We have dikes and even summer dikes and bank enforcements that all keep in place the river as a more or less channelized system. All this points to the fact that the tidal area of the Ems is in a bad status. It's not nice to see, and the European community has started to prepare an infringement procedure due to this. And the last chance to avoid it at this time was that the administrations from the Federal Republic to the more local administrations, the three main conservation associations, the largest company relying on the waterway, and the shipping administrations put together a plan. They made a contract called Master Plan Ems 2050 that tries to put in place measures to improve ecology and while keeping in mind economy. And the main objectives are resolving the slit problem, improving water quality, and improving estuary area habitats on 5 square kilometers. So there's an area attached to this with a timetable when to achieve different marks, with some extra projects as well, and protecting grass birds and their habitats on 2 square kilometers and maintaining the Ems as an efficient federal waterway. The financing is done by the federal state and the Federal Republic of Germany. So here you can see the historic development that you can see there are many flow loops that were cut off during straightening of the river to improve the waterway, and you can see it near Koldemünche. You can see the historic mark of the Ems there, and then it was straightened, and there was still an oxbow lake left, and later on there was even a dike that cut it off completely, and it started to slit up and lost its connection to the river. So here's our action plan, what we are trying to do in this area. We want to establish a tidal system, a tidal creek with mudflats and wetland that the earthwork for this should be completed this year. We have nearby, we have a freshwater pond that is in order to compensate freshwater habitats we touched during our project. That is connected to an irrigation pump to keep water level during summer, and even if needed to get water to the tidal system once water is too bad in the Ems, especially in summer. And in order to address the sediment problem and in order to reduce the entry of sediments to our system, we have some engineering structures. We have a passage structure we built that regulates inflow and outflow of water. That's connected to the sedimentation basin where water shall calm down and sediment should go to the ground, and only the upper layer of the water will enter our system, crossing an overflow threshold. And during outflow, we have a weir flap that is lowered so that outflow is stronger and takes sediments back to the river again. And you can see here a picture how it might look like later. Again, in large. And we have several challenges during our project and the whole master plan itself. We have the principle of humanity among contractual partners. And as already touched before, we have the problem of area procurement. So area should only be taken if owners are willing to sell. This, while they are not represented in the contract or any agriculture people are represented in the contract, although there's mainly grassland used by agricultural people in this area. And the other challenge was where to put all the excavated soil that has to be removed to establish our system. And due to all the local administrations that should also say yes to our project, we needed to try to obtain the permit. And it took quite a time to get all the people in the area to agree. The other challenge is the engineering structures to resolve the slit problem. They are quite, we need to control outflow and inflow of the water quite, and although doing so, we have to ensure dike safety and keeping it as simple as possible for operation and entertainment as possible. While planning the whole project, it was quite difficult due to the different types of soil we have in the area. There's sand, there's clay soil, there's even some places where rubbish was dropped, and to establish a concept for the use of the soil that we excavate. And during building, the clay soil is hard to possess. We need special vehicles to be able to get our work done, and some of the soil should be used to improve nearby grassland. It will be put on top and will be recultivated, and the grassland should be improved by this. But first of all, the clay soil has to dry up enough to get it to use on the grassland, and this quite takes some space, as you can see in the lower left. And always a challenge is the public relations, the acceptance of the single project and the overall project, keeping in mind that there are different objectives. This is to improve in habitats, and it will not change anything to the slit problem or water quality. And the quite challenging time horizon that says 2050 should all get better, and people tend to be eager that process is faster than that. So thank you very much for your attention. We are still constructing, as you can see, and will be at other areas around the tidal Ems.
Thank you very much for sharing this ambitious project with us. It looks like you're having a lot of challenges to overcome. So thank you for sharing that. Maybe before looking for the questions in the chat, maybe we could have we could go back to Chris to see, Chris, what are you saying about this project?
Yeah, it's a really nice, particularly technical presentation of how you get work done in these types of environments. I got some similar questions actually to the previous one, Klaus. I mean, I know that many different countries, even regions, have different ways of governing their natural resources. How easy is it in Germany to get this sort of local scale approach supported and mobilized? Because I know that often, I mean, the Dutch system has a very, for instance, flat system of managing water. It's less hierarchical, but I know in some parts of Germany that's not the case. But was it easy to actually get the planning together and get your feet on the ground, so to say?
No, it's quite difficult to get because all the local administrations have their part in the permit, and they have their local interests they look at. So getting the soil away was a great problem, and the most nice use of it would be to put it away and use it for dikes. But this was not possible because the local administrations didn't want any transports happening. So they focused on all the soil be used nearby. And it was quite challenging to achieve this. And
I had quite a technical question on that as well, because I know that often estuarine and coastal sediments, they can be quite rich in carbon. Is there any assessment of that when you're removing the I suppose particularly the clay content, which would have most of the carbon in, but there would also be an argument for using it in a way that you don't allow it to dry out too much, otherwise you might risk large carbon release. Is that something that's in your minds?
Yes, we have people that only watch at the soil, that look for the chemistry and match it to the grasslands we bring it, and it all has to work. And as all the area was influenced by the Ems once, it's matches, but it's quite challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yeah, I was gonna ask you a similar question to the one in the chat. So as a motivational factor, we have heard from Katrien that, okay, we had the floodings threatening also some major cities, and we have also had the motivation by the people. And we've heard from you that there is this infringement procedure from the EU that has been, you know, the sort of Damocles sword that was over your head. Do you think that was the only motivation, or would that have happened without this infringement procedure?
No, I think there is when you ask people and they start more to like the project, because all the older people that lived alongside the Ems know the old river. It was a sand river once, with sand banks, and yeah, you can go to the beach and start swimming in the Ems. Though some of the older people know how bad the Ems got, and there's some motivation to improve this.
Thank you very much to see that as well. So we have a question in the chat, which is, how much time did you need to get all the legal permissions, and especially the permission from the landowners?
Altogether, this was the first project that was envisioned to start, and the master plan originates from 2015. And it almost started at that time, and we needed to 2021 to get all the permit for this project. Although in this case the area belongs to the shipping administration, so it was already available in principle.
So 2015 to 2021, yeah?
Yeah.
And we have like a follow-up question on that, also from Nancy, who says, how did you generate the acceptance of the local people with information events, for example? So how did you approach that?
Yeah, information events, and we even while constructing now, we have already shown them 3 times our construction sites and told them how our next steps are, and with each visit of the construction site, it gets better, and the people start to believe that it might look really nice and be a nice project.
Well, thank you very much, Klaus, for this nice presentation and for answering the questions. That is an excellent example, and we wish you good luck with continuing your work, and maybe you can even finalize it a little bit earlier, as you say, a little bit faster. So thank you very much. And with this, we would like to go to the Danube Delta in Romania, which I had the occasion to see many, many, many years ago. Absolutely wonderful area as well. So yeah, we have Jenica Hanganu with us from the Danube Delta National Institute for Research and Development. So Jenica, please launch your presentation, and we're looking forward to hearing from you about Danube Delta wetland restoration. So far, we are just seeing your Zoom meeting.
It happens here, I don't know.
No, can you click on PowerPoint maybe?
Yeah.
Oh, now we are getting it. And now the full screen.
Should have access to here. Yeah, okay.
And now it's perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Astrid. Hello to everyone. I am Jenica Hanganu from the Danube Delta Institute, Romania. I am dealing with the research in Delta for 40 years. I was start with soil survey and mapping, vegetation survey and mapping with the management of natural resources and also wetland restoration in the Danube Delta. And here I want to make a very short presentation, an overview on wetland restoration in the Danube Delta. So maybe many of you know that the Danube Delta is a large area. It is cover 5,800 square kilometers in Romania part and 50 square kilometers in Ukrainian part. But this area has a human impact within the period 1966 and 1989. Over 100,000 hectares of wetland area were impacted for use as agricultural, forest, fishery polders, but also for protecting locality against flooding. Ecological reconstruction in the Danube Delta began in the Danube Delta in 1993. It was a GEF program within the Biodiversity Conservation Project in the Danube Delta, funded by the World Bank, and was followed by other national and international projects. The types of reconstruction in the Danube Delta are the main types: is reconnect polders to river flood paths, improve water circulation of channels, and biodiversity recovery, fauna and flora. Decision tools for ecological reconstruction we use, it was mainly GIS analysis of existing soil, vegetation, elevation map, and also hydrological modeling like SOBEC. Also, we based on experiments like filtering capacity of the reed beds, study on water quality, fauna and flora, habitat distribution, and also we made some ecological assessment of what will be economical benefit after ecological reconstruction. We did have some good results since 1993, over 51,000 hectares, 48% of the area of polders built in the Danube Delta have been restored, and others are proposed for ecological restoration. But unfortunately, however, the transformation of wetland into agricultural borders currently continue. Only in the last 10 years, almost 9,000 hectares of reed marshes were drained for agricultural use. The main reason is that there is subsidies for agriculture, and it encouraged many owners of the fish farms to drainage the land and to transform the fish farm polders in agricultural polders. But maybe we have some opportunity to change it, because now the administration of biosphere reserve is working on a new regulation, and we took this opportunity to make some proposal in order to shift the way natural resources are exploited. It is the case of the reed activities that was financed by Delta Lady Project, Interact Project. So in the regulation of biosphere reserve, it is a general provision in evaluation of renewable natural resources, and is a chapter 6.1 in general provision. We proposed new up two articles to be included. One, conservation of reed ecosystem to be a priority for administration of biosphere reserve in order to mitigate greenhouse gas emission. And also it is a need of to improve the concession scheme for the reed resources. So in some way, we are happy to give to have an feedback from administration of biosphere reserve, because they put a new article in actual order, Article 44, that says that specialized multidisciplinary study are required to identify innovative solutions for the administration of reed harvesting activity on the territory of the Danube Delta Biosphere Reserve. And the goal is to encourage the local population to capitalize on resources, redefine the area, as well as revise the concession process. So we hope that this change in the new regulation is expected to support the study for finding the best solution in order to stop land reclamation for transforming wetland area into agricultural ponds and preserve natural hydrological condition in the Danube Delta. One option we know would be use of paludi culture as it is proposed in in Germany and in other European country. And also for the paludi culture is important European community to give the same subsidy like for agriculture. And in this way, maybe the farmer or concessionary of the area will be not encouraged to transform that wetland area in agricultural area and to keep it as a paludi culture area. So we also this change in regulation may preserve wetland function and value for wildlife habitat, nutrient sink and sediment trapping, protection against erosion, carbon stocking, and also to preserve the valuable, let's say, economical for tourism visiting and economical value too. Also improve economic management of the reed marshes for a more sustainable profit in the reed business, improve or enforce the principle of ecological management of wetland ecosystem, and all this to mitigate climate change. For more activity on this subject, we have a project running, still I think running, is a Dafik Bloom, and you can use a link to learn more about what has happened in the Delta regarding wetland restoration. So acknowledgement for Interreg Europe project for financing the Delta project, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jenica. That was a very interesting presentation, how you have been influencing the change in this regulation. So congratulations for achieving this policy change. So another policy change that you would like to achieve is to have less subsidies for this agricultural land and see how this can be dealt with. I think a little bit similar, like in Katrien's case, it's like it's like an alternative for the business. In her case was the gravel business. In your case is instead of the agricultural business to have maybe some economic income through the reed. Yes, is that your idea? Very good. Well, maybe I give the word to Chris to see what he would like to see to understand from you.
Thanks very much, Astrid. Really nice to hear about how things are going in the Danube Delta. It's one of the first places I went to when I was a student. So I was floating around there 20 years ago, or more, actually, much more. Anyway, I was talking about it. I was really interested what you said about paludi culture, I think, Jenica, if I understood. So how you, paludi culture, did you mention that? How you can productively use these. What are the main, is it simply to give subsidies? Is that part of the trick to unlock that opportunity, or is there something else has to happen? How easily will farmers be able to capitalize upon that?
I think it should be a decision for a European community level, not for local level. But what we want to highlight is maybe administration of biosphere reserve in a new regulation to put some chapters and showing that the importance of changing or to stop land reclamation, and paludi could be an option. And maybe on the political level, country and European level, this should be happened. Yeah, it may be a long process. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was listening to a German, it's a small medium enterprise working in Germany, trying to mobilize paludi culture. But he highlighted the subsidies issue, but he also said you need an economy of scale. So is it also that you need investment in supply chains and an industry who can use it, or is that already somehow present in Romania?
It is a lot of room for improving the reed businesses in the Delta. Also, in this project, Delta Lake project, with the partners from the Twente University, we wrote an articles and in sustainability showing what are the benefits for using reed resources, not only for the paludi culture, but also for other creating other goods from the reed resources.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chris and Jenica. We have 2 more questions before we go back to all of our presenters. The first question is, how do you manage the 51,000 hectare of restored polder area? Is it now a national park or still in private ownership?
The restored area, mainly it was abandoned fish farm and agricultural farms. So they belong to the state now, not to private persons. That was the way that we could succeed to to turn agricultural land in agricultural land. But if it will be private, it will be much more difficult.
And is the Delta a national park?
It is Natura 2000, is let's say Ramsar site, is a biosphere reserve. So it have a lot of quality. I don't know how to say. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can I, there's two questions with a brief answer, please. So the first one is, you mentioned carbon farming briefly. Was this model tried to add income? Jenica?
Yeah, carbon.
Carbon farming, you mentioned that briefly. Was that used?
No.
No. Okay.
I mean, if we want to preserve the carbon in the soils, and to preserve the carbon in the soils, we can let's read wetlands like as they are. So to do not transfer or drainage them. When you are drainage wetlands in the Danube Delta, the organic matter it is mineralized in very short time. It's amazing. Usually in the delta, almost all reed beds you see are floating reed beds, and they have 5 meters of pit under beneath. And all this pit that usually was built during last 6.5 thousand years in Holocene times, in just few months, if the soil is drainage, are mineralized. So
thank you. Thank you, Jenica. I have one more question, please. A very short answer. So is there also cultural historic assessment about the historic polders in the delta? It might be good to leave some valuable polders recognizable. So do you have a cultural historic assessment about historic polders? So is there some historic polders marked somehow, are they somehow recognizable?
The historic polders, I don't know what means, but we still have in the delta, I mean, large part of the delta is still in pristine condition.
Yeah, so this is still in the way it used to be, and
so the way to be. I think one of the danger could be also it is draining the channels in the Danube Delta, because all the lake in the Danube Delta are very shallow. And if you enlarge and improve water circulation, the water bring also sediments, and it can be that the siltation of the lake, this process to be very rapid. So when you are doing this type of things, improving water circulation, you have to think some engineering solution in order to trap the sediments before the water is coming in the lake.
Thank you very much, Jenica, for trying to answer these questions. They're sometimes a little bit difficult. We can maybe come back to that a little bit later as well. So I would like to ask all our speakers to please come back, let's say, with their cameras so that we can all see you. So we have one question from the chat, which is to all of you, and also had one question to, to see a little bit what you think or your conclusion is in terms of what you think are the main success factors for succeeding in wetland restoration. So 1 or 2 success factors would be really great. And the other question we have here from Jeroen de Waremaker is, the restoration of wetlands today is a synonym for land use change. So from agriculture to nature, back to nature. So, which is a long, lengthy process. So he's asking, should we concentrate on ways that also give a future to agricultural production, even though that might be a less pristine wetland? But in light of the climate crisis, do we need as much wetlands as possible, or do we need the best wetlands as possible? So I think that's, I hope you get what the question is. So if you could please answer these two questions. So first one or two success factors you think, and the second one, do we need the best wetlands possible, or do we just need more wetlands? So I'm starting maybe with Chris, who has started as well, and then I'm going to ask you all.
Okay, I'll try and be quick then. I mean, success factors. Listening to the cases, I hear, yeah, you need a good business case. Actually, you need more than investment from government, as it were. You need for business to be involved and to be part of the story. And I think a business case for investment and the active involvement of the private sector seems quite important in most of the cases we have, or in the case of that I knew, perhaps as a future perspective. And the other one I take particularly from Katrien's case is really local engagement. If you're in it for the long haul, you need to bring people with you. And that means co-creating the idea and the planning and where necessary, involving people in it. So those would be my two main success factors I've seen. As for the second question, do you want me to do both questions, or shall I stop? Yeah, that's a difficult one. I mean, there's people in my world who will say biodiversity is everything. I'm more of a pragmatist. I think, and that's why everybody involved in wetlands. Wetlands are fantastic systems. They provide a lot of services to people, including biodiversity. And I think if you look at the different crises that we're facing in the years to come related to climate, I think we need as much as possible. Not every wetland should perform beautifully for biodiversity and for flood security, etc. But we need to bring them in where we need them as part of nature-based solutions to identify problems. It's not just about the best ones for biodiversity.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's bringing together your 2 points on, there has to be a business case as well, I guess, and as much as possible. So that would enable that, hopefully. Katrien.
Success factors I want to say is the one is the same as Chris said. The local agreement is very important. Also with farmers, to make a little bridge to the question of Jeroen. In the gravel extraction law I mentioned, there's also a needed agreement of both the nature and the farmers sector. Without that, a project cannot take place. So this local agreement and local knowledge of each other is crucial. And the other one, maybe it's because I'm a historian, but I think the landscape history, the wetland history is also crucial, and knowing and studying old maps, studying historical land use, how did farmers do it before big events in 20th century took place, where people knew damn good where to live and where not, when water was around. So this historical knowledge is crucial in how to restore a landscape in a I don't know the word, but authentic way. Yeah, to give it authenticity and to make it land in the heads of local people who have also this historical knowledge sometimes. And to answer Jeroen's question, the local agreement with farmers is a thing in the Valley of the Meuse. But I think also that this winter bed I showed you should be even bigger. Maybe not everywhere a beautiful nature, but it should be bigger to face climate challenges. And this will include agricultural land as well to be able to overflow, which is mainly in winter when there are no crops. So I think even more dikes and even more things should be removed out of the winter bed, and agriculture should stay on some places we have the philosophy that the closer to the river, the more important biodiversity restoration is, and the further away from the river, the more agriculture important is. So it goes along with a vision on the landscape, in which both functions are important.
Super. Thank you so much for adding that. I think you're seeing already some pattern in what you're going to answer to Jeroen's question. So I'm going to Claus Hinz. So please, what do you think the success factors are, and what do you think, better or more wetlands?
I think both. Like Katrien says, you need the highlight wetlands where biodiversity was historically important and should come back again, and there must be some places where there must be some agriculture use or other use possible while still getting things wet and working for us in regard of climate change and so on. So I think both, depending where you look at, and also what is possible on that local spot you look at. And yeah, regarding success, it's mainly about acceptance, getting the people involved, and when you do something technical as we do in places as we need to, you also have to find people that already have experience to get things as smooth as possible, and to get the ideas to get the restoration work.
Thank you very much. Also the people's aspect underlined, and also the possibility to use the wetlands also with agriculture. So the combination of both worlds seems to be coming up, which brings us back to Jenica for your success factors and what do you think?
Yeah, I think conservation more wetlands of course is needed. Only as I said, the Danube Delta wetlands cover some 500,000 of hectares, but it used to be 1 million of hectares on the lower Danube, only in the Romanian part, that are now covered, are transformed in agricultural land. And it was some project to make an assessment of transforming this lower Danube areas that now are using as agricultural in wetlands area, and showing the benefit, economical benefit, social benefit, and so on. It was a large project dealing with this project, but there are a lot of course, economical interest, and so it's very difficult to make this action to happen. On the other hand, there is a lot of area, thousands of abandoned agricultural land on the terrestrial part. So maybe it is a need to improve and to recultivate this abandoned land. So in order to balance, let's say if you are taking land from the, of course, both fertile now in the wetlands, and to move in other parts, compensate somehow will be a good solution. Regarding the quality, of course, wetlands are depending on the good water quality, good water circulation, less nutrients in the water, and this could be combined with the restriction of water framework directive, habitat directive, in order to have also a rich wetland in biodiversity and of the good quality.
Thank you, Jenica, for pointing that out as well. So the combination with the Water Framework Directive and also, using abundant land and make this accessible for agricultural use, while other places can be used for wetlands again. So thank you very much. There's a lot of work ahead of us, which is an important work on wetlands, as we have heard throughout the presentations. And thank you for sharing with us these inspiring examples. We all hope that we can work more on wetland restoration in the future. So use these possibilities, also sharing information, raising the awareness, not only locally, but also with other areas that are working on wetlands. So thank you very much for all your contributions. As I said at the beginning, we will of course share the recordings of this webinar, all the presentations. We hope that this is also sparking some collaboration, maybe in European projects, maybe otherwise. We hope that you've enjoyed our discussions today. We will send you all the link to a follow-up article where you can see all the PowerPoint presentations and also any other interesting information that has been shared in the chat in terms of links to documents and so on. So a big thank you. Let us know if you want to work more on climate adaptation or nature restoration in our webinars, or if you would like to have a matchmaking or a peer review where you're discussing your local challenges in nature restoration and climate adaptation, as we are offering this service and it's easy to get. So please be in contact. A big thank you to all of you, and hope to see you soon on a wetlands restoration project. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.